Hey guys, and welcome to our second part of the Houdini Railroad series. Today we're going to go over collisions and materials from Unreal. So let's dive into Houdini. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to create the collision meshes. Right now, if we dive in, we have our rails, we have our sleepers, and we have our ballast. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another subnet, and I'm going to call this my collision. And of course I'm gonna hook that up into our final merge. Hit L so we get a nice layout, and I'm gonna color this the same as we always do. This will have geometry as well, but because it has collision I'm just gonna color it light green so I know, okay, this is something else. In here I'm gonna select all of my nodes because I don't need any of them right now, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place a object merge. And with this object merge, I'm basically gonna search for the output nodes that I want to use as collision. So I know, okay, my sleepers. We have our out sleepers here. And hit export relative path. If I hit accept, you can see, okay, we got sleepers. And then even if we go back and we change the type of sleepers or any of that, we still get the right output. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create the same thing for the ballast. So instead of sleepers, I'm gonna head out and we want the ballast. And for now, we want this output of our ballast. And you can see, okay, that's nice. Then another object merge. And that's gonna be our actual rail. So we're gonna go to our rails and we're gonna get our out rails. Hit accept. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to delete everything that's currently on there because I only need these objects as a collision. So I'm going to tap an attribute delete, and I'm basically removing everything. So I don't want anything in there. Then the next thing is I'm going to have a group delete. So I also don't want any groups. And this is just to make sure that I don't have anything. I don't have anything in my Unreal scene that I don't want to. Place a merge so we can actually see what we're doing. Add these ones in here. Hook this one up. I'm going to hit L so we get a nice layout again. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color. And for now I'm just going to color this green. Just a nice dark green. So we have our color coded collision as well. Looks good. And then finally I'm going to create a group. But what I need is I need specific collision groups for Unreal. So if I type in collision, we can see we have collision source, but there's also a game engine collision. And what it is basically a normal group node, but it already has the right name. And this part is important. It's important that especially for Unreal, that you have collision lowercase geo. That will automatically read in as collision. Okay, then from there I'm going to place another output node, and I'm going to call this out collision, as you could have expected. Hook that up, view it, hit L for the layout, and let's go out. Okay, right now if we merge everything, you can see we get this weird stuff going on. It probably has to do because we don't have any normals. So just for my output node, I'm just going to create a normal node as well. And that will get rid of that stuff. Now it's nice to have this collision, and it's nice to have it merged, but maybe for some game testing I don't really need the collision immediately. So I'm going to type in switch node. I'm going to create another merge node. I'm going to cut this loose. I'm going to have this one and my collision in here. Then first of all, I don't want the collision. Then second, I do want collision. And then finally that goes into our output. hit L, and then with this switch node, we can easily say, okay, I want no collision, or I want collision. Super convenient. So let's change that in the control node as well. Edit parameter interface. And this doesn't really belong to any of these basics. So or to any of these settings, the rails, the sleeper, the ballast. So I'm just going to add that to our top. And I'm just going to use a toggle. I'll place that right above here, above the curve type. Just going to call this collision switch. Collision, hit apply, accept. Copy this parameter. I'm going to place that in our switch node. Paste relative reference. And now you can see, if I select this, and I zoom in on the switch, you can see the line change. And you can see it in the viewport as well. Alright, well, that's the collision. That's fairly easy. So since we have the collision, let's just test out if it works in Unreal. I'm gonna create a new scene, and just for the heck of it, I'm gonna use a third person. It's easy for us to walk around. I'm gonna hit create project, and as you can see, we get this nice clean scene. So I don't really have a need for all these boxes and all that stuff. I'm just gonna delete these. I don't want this weird thing here, and I don't need this third person stuff because I know that's going on. Alright, so that gives us our basic Unreal scene. And I'm gonna go to content. I'm just gonna create a new folder. And this folder, I'm gonna call this Houdini. You don't really have to do it. You could immediately import it into your content, but it's fine. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to import something here. And what I want to import here is my HDA. But as you know, we haven't created one yet. So I'm quickly going to jump back into Houdini. And I'm going to create an HDA out of this asset. I'm going to hit L again for my layout, hit H so we can see everything. I'm going to go out, and this subnetwork, our train track generator, that's going to be our HDA. So we're going to hit create digital asset. That pops up a new window. And what I want to call this train track generator. Or let's keep it consistent with the naming of our tutorial series. Let's call this Houdini Railroads. Where I want to save this, for now I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Okay, I'm going to hit accept. That's going to pop up a new window. And for now, we don't really need an input. Could be nice. We can do that a little bit later. Maximum 1 input. And we also don't really need an output. Right now, I don't need to use anything from this HDA in any nodes further ahead. So I'm just going to hit apply. And what that does is it basically creates our HDA here, and with an empty parameter interface. So let's actually make that. And because we had the control node before, we can just grab this, drag this into the root, and it will automatically create all the parameters that were on this null node, including the ones that we hid before. We don't need those, so I can just delete them. The moment I hit apply, you can see that they all turn green because they're all linked. They're all one level out, linked to our train track generator. And now if I look at this HDA, we have our nice stuff here. So we have a nice high level interface for all the stuff that's happening very deep down. Alright, well that should do it for now. Let's dive back into Unreal. Let's go to our desktop, and there we have our Houdini Railroads. I'm gonna hit open. As you see, it nicely gets placed here. We can see the Houdini logo, so we know it works. The moment we place it in here, everything starts generating. The problem for now is that we didn't really create a proper track yet. So you can see we got like all our nice stuff here, but it's not really working. And the reason why it's not working is if we go back to Houdini itself, is we have an input here, but the moment we cut off that input, our train track disappears, right? So that's the next thing that we're going to do. We're going to make sure that, if I'm hitting L again, I want to make sure this is at the right spot, that if I don't have any input here, there's nothing connected, I actually want to use my own curve. So I'm going to create a curve, and I'm just going to set 2 points, 0, 0, and I'm going to go -10 to +10. So what that does is this basically creates a nice curve in the middle of our generation. I'm going to place a switch node. And what I want to do is I want to switch between this and our in curve. And that is what's going to go in our initial attributes. Hit L again for our layout. And now I can easily switch. But I don't really want to switch manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a fit expression. And I'm going to fit 0 to 1. And then I'm going to count the points in my in curve. So number of points inside of our in curve. So it actually counts if there's any points in there. And then I want to set those to, oh, let's move out a little bit. 0 and 1, and then another none. So basically what this does, this counts the amount of points, and if there are points in it, it's going to be 1, and if there's none, it's going to be 0. And since our 0 output is our left input curve, that means that if we go all the way down, and we view our output node, we go here, we get our train track like this, and the moment I cut this off, you see it gets generated on the spot. Alright, let's save this, save our node type, and let's check in Unreal if it now works. You can just hit the right mouse button, and from there, I'm just going to say rebuild selected. And there we go. We have a nice railroad. What you could also do is right click on this one and then rebuild all instances. Basically, if you have multiple instances in your scene, they will all reload. Alright, so we have our collision. I'm going to turn that off. Just for the sake of checking, I'm going to say rebuild selected, so I know, okay, everything works. Now when I hit play, I should be able to walk around and walk through. Seems about right. Okay, I'm going to hit escape. Let's see if we select our railroad, turn on the collision, hit play again. Let's see what this does. And we got collision. It's that easy. Alright, well that's it for the collision. The next thing that I want to do though is I want to add some cool materials. And I'm not going to create all the materials by myself, but in our starter content from Unreal, we actually have a lot of materials. Right? So that's pretty cool to have all of these different materials. And we can actually use some of them. So we can, in example, use for the sleepers, we can use some wood. So let's say maybe I want to use this walnut because it has a nice dark color to it. Just gonna copy it, copy the reference, and that basically copies the path inside of Unreal. And then when we dive back into Houdini and I go inside, I'm just gonna hook this up for now, just for testing. If I go into my sleepers, I can add that specific reference path somewhere. But what I first need to do is I need to unwrap. Because right now, if I have an example, this box, which looks cool, and have it transformed so it's at the right spot. If I check the UVs right now with a UV quick shade, and I view this when it's hooked up, we can see we get like a really messed up shape. But we can easily get that with a UV unwrap, because for this, it's a very generic box shape. It's very easy. So if we hook that up, we can get it. I don't want to scale it. I want to have a nice, evenly spaced UV. Right, oh, I hooked that up there. I can delete this one for now. Hit L again for our layout. Of course, I want to do the same for the other one. So I'm just going to copy this, place this in here. Then the next thing that I want is I want to create the material. And usually when you create a material, you would just type in material, choose that. But if we look a little bit further, we can actually see we have a specific Unreal material. Gonna hit enter. And basically what this one does is it allows us to use that reference from before and just paste it in here. So I'm gonna say Control A, Control V, and that gives us our material. I'm gonna remove the last backtick, and then here everything in front of the game, I'm gonna remove that as well. and that will give us our walnut. We're going to go to our out sleepers. Of course, I have to save this. So again, right mouse button, save node type. Then if we dive back into Unreal and we go to our content and to our Houdini, I say rebuild all instances, we can see it changes. We have a very nice walnut color. Cool. That works nice. And if we chose the different one, so not the, let's see, not the wooden sleepers, but the concrete, you can see it reverts back to its original because the material isn't set for that one. And the convenient thing of working around like this is that we can have different artists working on different materials, and we don't really have to worry about them because it just references the path. So the artist can keep working on the material, make it better and better, and you can keep working on your Houdini assets without having to wait for them. So I'm going to do the same for these ones, and I'm actually going to use the concrete because we actually have in the starter content, we actually have a material called poured concrete. Let's see where that is. And there we go. So again, we copy the reference, dive back into Houdini, and we add our Unreal material. Paste the reference, remove the material path, just hook it up, and I'm going to hit L again for our layout. It's nice and clean. Save. Check again in Unreal. Rebuild this selection. There we go. We have nice concrete sleepers. So that works perfect. So back in Houdini, I was thinking that it would be really cool if we have all these sleepers and they look very straight. I'm just going to turn off the collision so you can see them a little bit better with the contrast. They're kind of like boring and perfectly straight. And the power of Houdini is always working with proceduralism and make everything look a little bit different to get that effect of the real world. So what we can actually do is we can get an attribute randomize, and I'm going to place that after our resample. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the normals. So instead of color, I'm going to change the normal, and I'm going to change it in 1 dimension. And these two values will basically say how far these get jittered. So if I set this one to 0, they're all nice and straight. If I set this one to negative 0.5, they'll go left. And then if I add 0.5 on the other side, we have left and right. But instead of doing that by hand, we can actually control that in our parameter interface. So we can actually create in our type properties, we can actually create a parameter for that. So in our sleeper settings, we have the sleeper type, and we have wood, concrete. So let's create a float. Sleeper type. I'm going to call this sleeper jitter. And I'm going to hit apply. And that gives us a nice sleeper jitter here. And I'm going to create a toggle right in front of it. So we can actually say, okay, I want this to work or I don't want this to work. So this is going to be our toggle for jittering. And I actually don't want to show this label right now. Hit apply. I'm going to say horizontally join the next parameter. And when I do that, I'm going to show you in a minute. It actually moves that sleeper jitter horizontally next to this one. So if we turn this on, you can see we have a nice flow. The same with the ballast. But for our concrete, it's kind of weird if they have a jitter, because they are very straight and perfectly aligned. And the same would go for our steel ones, because they are on the rail. But wood, you know, during aging and whatever, it can go and jitter. So I actually want this to only work or only show up if it's set to wooden. And we can do that again by getting the name, going in here, and I want to disable this one when the sleeper type equals No, I want to disable it when it does not equal 0. We need to have the curly brackets in front and after. Gonna hit apply. And now when we change this, you can see this one turns off. Of course, we can just copy this one, paste it on our sleeper jitter. So again, disable, apply. Then this one, I actually want to use this when this is turned off or on. So instead of sleeper type, I can actually type toggle jitter. Apply, and now when we change this one, this turns off. I'm going to add this one as well. So I can turn both of them off, or when I have boot, I can turn these off as well. See that I need to change this one. So if it's not, I'm going to say if it is, and hit accept. Okay, now we can change this. I'm going to copy this parameter. I'm going to go back to our sleepers, back to our attribute randomize. I'm going to paste that in here. So I'm going to say paste relative reference. And then I'm going to copy this specific parameter. I'm going to paste that in here. I want to have the negative value of whatever comes out from this one. And for this one, I thought I said paste relative reference before. Let's do it again. Sleeper jitter, copy parameter, sleepers, paste relative reference. I have my 0, and then I want to add, or actually minimum value we can do negative. I'm going to do this, and then if we actually look at our jitter, we can go really far, and we don't want that. So I'm going to do the maximum that we have right now, which is 10, and I'm just going to multiply our minimum value by a very small number, so we can test with 0.1 first. Okay, that's still too much. Let's make it even smaller, 0.5, still too much. Maybe 0.1, that's not enough. Actually a little bit more. Let's set it to 0.25. So none of them are actually touching. And this is like exaggerating, this is 10, this is our max. But that way we can just easily create a little bit of jitter, which makes the whole railroad look a little bit better, more realistic. Alright, I'm gonna revert this to its default. And when I'm reverting it, I see it's 0, so I'm just gonna add a little bit extra. So in our sleeper jitter, I'm actually gonna set our default to 1. Hit accept, and we see we have a nice jitter. If we turn this off, it's still working, so we need to add this to a switch. Copy this parameter, diving in there, diving into the sleepers, type switch, and our first input is going to be just our resample. Our second input is going to be the attribute randomize. Hook that up in here, select input, paste relative reference, hit L, so we have a nice layout. And now we can see with a single toggle we can change this. If we change from these to concrete, we still have the nice straight lines. Alright, I'm just going to revert everything to its default values and turn off the collision. That concludes it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. This was Dokai. Bye bye.